I was not feeling good, meaning I would have pain whenever I would put my left leg in a pants. And I remember like I was trying to put a jeans on and it would not go in, like my left foot was got in, but it was just a little tough to kind of get it up. I'm like, oh, like, so then I kind of took off my jeans. I was like, Eb, do you notice is my leg swollen? And she's like, well, I can't really tell. And I'm like, okay. And then, I asked my mom, she was like, yeah, it looks a little swollen. I'm like, yeah, because I can't, it's not the same to put my jeans on and that leg. And then, of course they were like, oh, does it hurt? And I'm like, yeah, it's been hurting me. And so my mom decided to like do some massages. It didn't really help, so I went to the doctor at that time because I had already had my physical in December. So this is around February.
And nothing was out of the ordinary in December?
No, everything was good. My physical was great. I was not in pain. I did. Then I went and told my doctor, and she was like, "Oh, okay. We think it might be like you might have pulled a muscle or something. So just kind of monitor it for a few days, and then we'll see." Then my foot was noticeably, after a few 5 days, I think it was like noticeably swollen. So then I was like, okay, then I was a little scared because I thought maybe I got like a DVT, like a deep vein thrombosis. And the reason why I thought that is because I was studying for my board exams for medicine, from a medical school. And I was like, oh, because I'm sitting around and don't exercise, I could easily get a clot. That was my thing. So I didn't go to the doctor at that time, and I'm like, look, I'm worried that I have a DVT. And she's like, okay, let's just do an ultrasound to see if you do. So the same day I went over to the ultrasound and got it done, and they told me right away that it was negative for a DVT, but there was a pretty big size, cyst in there. And
in your leg.
Right. It was behind my knee. So it was in the popliteal fossa, which is this area right here. So it was here. And they said it's a pretty big cyst. And I'm like, really? I didn't notice. They're like, oh, it's at least as big as a golf ball. And I'm like, oh, okay. Then I came home. I waited for my doctor to actually call me. Actually, she did call me. She's like, oh, I got your, good thing it's not a DVT. She actually called me personally, Becky. And then she was like, look, I think, it's just probably like a Baker cyst, which are very common. And that's where they usually are found behind your cyst, behind your knee. And she said, usually they go away on their own. So she's like, just kind of, let it go. And it'll get better as days goes. It got worse. The pain got worse. Then I called her. I was like, look, it's really painful.
How?
About like literally 3 or 4 days. The pain was just, it was really hard to deal with. I mean, just bending my knee was hard. Sleeping a certain way would be hard. I would kind of wake up from sleep because it was just, if I put pressure on my back of my knee, it would hurt me. So then I called her and I asked her to see if I could maybe go to an orthopedic, and she's like, you have a PPO, so just call and go. I did. So I looked it up and I found the nearest orthopedic. He looked at it. He said, it could be a tear in your meniscus, but what we could do is we'll just actually go ahead and do an MRI to make sure exactly what the problem is. The next day I got a call from his doctor's office saying that he wanted to see me right away, and they got my MRI results. I'm like, okay, this is obviously not good, because usually you never hear from a doctor, so it's like, okay, this is not good. So I drove down there and I sat down, and he's like, well, it's a pretty big mass. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, it's almost as big as a baseball. I'm like, what? So how did it go from a golf to baseball so quickly? But it did, apparently. Or I'm not sure if they were accurate when they did, because they were really not, looking for that. So
right.
They could have not been really looking for it. Then and he's like, well, this mass is very highly suspicious of a sarcoma. He's like, but I'm not telling you have it. But
what is sarcoma?
Okay, so sarcoma is actually, it's named because it's a tissue cell in a muscle, like in a connective tissue. So it's a connective tissue cancer. Really, that's exactly what it is. And so you could have sarcoma in different places. Mine was actually in the soft tissue, meaning the muscle, and it was behind my knee. Okay. Most commonly, sarcomas are in your extremities. So it's very common. Okay. And it's very common to have it in a place that I did. But mine was a little lower. It was in the popliteal fossa. But so basically, that's what they were suspicious of. He's like, I want you to see right away this oncologist orthopedic who's a specialist. Like his specialty is sarcomas. And he's like, go see him, right? And I was like, okay, I'll go see him. So I did. The next day I did. At that point, like my whole family knew. Like I came home like, you guys. So they're highly suspicious of sarcoma, and my mom is like, my mom is the type of person like she wouldn't accept things easily, readily. Right. She's like, no, it's not gonna be sarcoma. And I'm like, Mom, it's weird the way it's kind of appeared like that. I think it is, but she's like, no, it's not. My dad's like, well, you never know. Like my dad's like, you have to wait for your results to know. Like why freak out right now? You gotta wait. That's the type of thinking my dad. Ebony's like, Zunaira's dying, literally. She's like, she told me she got in bed and she's like, I love you so much, and I just, even if it's few years that I have to live with them, I'm like, I'm not fucking dying yet, But she's like, I'm just glad that I met you and we got to do all these things, we got to travel, and I'm just looking at her like, it's going to be fine, just chill out, it's going to be fine, I'm going to make it, Because for me, I know sarcomas don't kill, right? Unless it's spread everywhere. So I was like, hopefully if it's not spread everywhere, I'm going to live, But I knew like going in there, like if it's a big mass, one of the way of treatment is amputation. So I was kind of pretty prepared for it. So I go to this guy, the next day everybody went. My dad took off, my mom took off, everybody was at the doctor, Ebony, my brother, my sister, everybody was there. It's like ridiculous. So we're like in this small room and they wanted to know, well, he didn't have any answers. He's like, I can't tell you anything. I have to do a biopsy. But, like my mom was like, is it a sarcoma? He's like, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. But he felt it, But I think he knew deep down, but he didn't want to say it because he wanted to make sure, like, right. At that time, Ebony had like to be out in Philadelphia the same day, next day. So the day that I actually had my my orthopedic surgeon, like a sarcoma specialist appointment, Ebony was supposed to leave at noon, fly out to Philly, or no, take a train to Philly for work, and so she decided to cancel that, and she said she was going to just drive tomorrow in the morning. Well, I knew she was going to travel, so I was like, my biopsy, I want it early as possible. So they said that the earliest he can do is 8 o'clock because of the slot that he has at the hospital. So he'll work me in at 8. Ebony was like, okay, fine, don't worry, I'll just stay and I'll go later, because she had to present, actually do the welcoming of all the conference. She had to initiate it basically. And so so we're like there, so they call me in, I go in, and literally it took 15 minutes, like I was done. I was not under anesthesia, it was just local anesthesia, and he's like, digging in, and I could feel him digging in and getting, cells.
Oh, it's weird.
It was the weirdest feeling, and it was weird because I just knew it's coming, like I knew like how I'm gonna deal with this, like.
But you knew it was sarcoma.
Yeah, I had that feeling, absolutely, and it's so annoying because I knew the terms and I knew what they were saying, so I was very I was listening in, but he knew I knew, so he was being really he was like, oh, okay, like do that, and then they'll go in the other room, and he was talking while they were looking underneath the slide. Like he was not saying a word because He knew I kind of knew, which I remember. And so it was just like, I was just talking to the nurse, like she was sitting there monitoring me, my heartbeat and all that stuff. I was just telling her like, oh my gosh, it's going to be sarcoma. She's like, calm down. Might not be. I'm like, no, it's going to be sarcoma. So I come out, they bring my family in one room, it was really somebody's office. They probably asked them to go out for a minute. And we were in their office, and it was a really small room, I remember, and they kind of wheeled me in on the wheelchair. My family was already there in the room, and I asked them, I was like, did he tell you guys yet? Do you know? And they were like, no, they just called us in this room. And that's when he kind of walks in, the doctor, the sarcoma specialist, and he came, and he was like, well, it is a sarcoma. So everybody was just like, and then I'm looking at him and I'm like, okay. And he goes, it is high grade. I'm like, okay.
What is high grade?
High grade meaning it has very irregular cells of cancer. So that means it's really weird and bizarre. So it's moving fast. So high grade cancers usually, they're not they don't just, so cancer is whenever a regular cell, right? We multiply, which normally we do that. But one dies and then another cell comes out in our body constantly. This is going on. But what happens is when that process kind of gets effed up. And these cells, instead of like killing the old ones, they constantly, good cells are building and building and building. That's how the mass kind of got big. So it's like cells building, building, building. And then, so what happens is, when those cells kind of look like your body cells, like they're replicated pretty nice, then it's a low grade. It's just something happened. But when those cells, when you look at them, they look nothing like any other cells around in the area. Then they are irregular looking and bizarre. Those are high grade, and also it has to do with the count of the cell when you get a slide. So that's when they say, oh, it's a high grade or low grade.
Okay.
So basically, high grades, it's really a way of prognosis, finding out a prognosis for a patient, meaning like what kind of outcome are they going to expect. So in my case, it was a high grade, meaning that, it is because of the size of it, I was at stage 4 for a sarcoma, meaning that, I'm at the end stage. So now it's next stage is for it to spread in my body. And it hadn't, thank God. After CT, I found out that it hadn't, so which was kind of good. We kind of like got it right there. So that's when I found out, and he goes, well, try to save your life. That was his, he's like, because it's a high grade, I'm not sure exactly where else it is. So we're going to try to save your life, one, and then second, we're going to try to, save your leg, and if we can't, then, the end is amputation.